Back at WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net. I am holding up my brackets. I got two brackets here, and I always say my pools usually turn into puddles at some point by Thursday afternoon. This year, it would be the Maryland Terps doing me in. Belmont, Temple, I'm not sure, probably LSU if they get there, but certainly the notion that they could get back to Washington, D.C. and potentially see Michigan State and then maybe Duke harkens back to the days of yesteryear. Leigh Klein joins us here from That Bracket Show and longtime CEO of Five-Star Basketball and all things college basketball. And this is the week, right? I mean, everybody's a genius on their bracket. Everybody's going to get their $1 million in the pool. But certainly if you're a Terps fan here, boy, confidence is at a low for the team being in the tournament with real players. It hasn't been a good month around here, Leigh, and I know I had you on 2 weeks ago talking about that.
Yeah, I mean, I look at from mid-January to today, and the Terps have lost more than they've won. And so, you're tantalized with the talent that this team has, so many different pieces, but it hasn't really worked together as an efficient machine recently. However, even though they've lost 3 out of the last 4, you look, an opportunity knocks. Here they have a pretty good seed when you consider that they could have been on the 10 line like a Minnesota or so on. They've got a good seeding, they've got a good opportunity, and then you have this carrot that if you win 2 games in which you might be favored, to win, then you can end up in Washington, D.C. in front of a big packed house favoring the Terps. So really interesting. I think that for Maryland, it's just about playing good team basketball and living up to their capability. And here's kind of a second life at it, right? Second season.
Well, it's interesting, Leigh, that you would say with Maryland, when it first came out, the first thing I saw was 6, right? And I saw that the other team is going to be playing basketball between now and then, right? And traveling, right? On top of all that. And then I thought, Yale, LSU, okay, LSU, and they've got all these problems. And then I look down the board and I say, same thing you did. Wow, they really do set this up for the Bachelor kind of drama, right? Like they want all the cat fights, all the Hatfields and McCoys to get together. I dare I say I wanted to call this the NACC, given the Duke, Virginia, and North Carolina top seeding. But for Maryland, there's so much at stake here for Turgeon, who I know you must know how loud it's getting here for Mark Turgeon as we get around the decade point, and there have been no Final Fours and no real threats of that, and the notion that even if they just get to the 16 and go quietly in the night to Michigan State at home next week before a packed house, that would somehow be okay, that they got to the 16. That never used to be okay during Gary Williams, and that certainly wasn't where the ceiling was for the program. But this is a chance for them to sort of dream the dream a little bit, that if you want to showdown with Duke, you want to talk about Duke, almost a decade after leaving the ACC, well, you're not going to get a crack at them unless you take care of business here between here and there. But it's all sitting there. And for the Fernandos and the guys going out the side door and these freshmen to have this kind of an experience here, they talked about this. They looked good enough to do this back in January. But to your point, there's been nothing that would say that they're going to wake up in a sleepy gym in Jacksonville in front of virtually no one off the beach on Thursday and not play the way they did last week against Nebraska or 2 months ago at Madison Square Garden against Illinois. They've had some very, very sleepy efforts in times where there was not a lot of energy in the room.
And they can't sleepwalk through whether it be Belmont or Temple, right? They're not going to be able to sleepwalk through anyone. They have to bring it on the court. And for Maryland, that's been challenge number 1, bringing it on the court. But let's remember the one thing about the tournament. This Terps team has guys that can make shots. They have perimeter weapons. They've got a rim protector. They can go and get it on the glass. They have the pieces. So I think that when we look at this, what gets you excited if you are a Terps fan is that they've got the talent where they legitimately can make a run. not just to the second weekend. They can get to maybe even an Elite Eight. But it comes down to one night at a time, bringing it together and playing cohesive. Which Anthony Cowan Jr. are you going to get on a given day? And so that's the key. But for Turgeon, I know, they talk about pressure and that part, expectations. He's done an incredible job recruiting. I think he's been able to really build a niche as far as, players and that. Now he's got to be able to translate that into tournament success. That's the challenge for him. I think he has that one Sweet 16. He's got to now be able to go and show that he can not just make the tournament. He had 3 years in a row where he was able to get the Terps in. He had the absence last year. Now it's time to get back to that Sweet 16 caliber ability and show what he can do as a coach and get these guys playing for the sum, something that's bigger than the individuals.
Leigh Klein is our guest. He is Leigh Allen Klein out on Twitter and co-host of that bracket show as well as former five-star camp CEO. Give everyone your background because I think anyone who goes to your Twitter and sees Pat Scarry in the middle and all of the coaches that have been around you and the basketball that has been such a part of your life, this is your favorite week of the year, right? Like you're one of the guys that I could sit here and you know things about Belmont that the folks say, where's Belmont? I know a little bit about Temple and John Chaney and whatnot, but this is one of those weeks where your tentacles are out and you've got people and places everywhere that kind of makes it a lot of fun for you, right?
It does. It almost becomes a trip down memory lane where you get to see that, that kid that you trained at, when they're 12 years old and now they're playing on the big stage, or you get to see a coach and you remember the journey, whether it be, Buffalo's Nate Oates, and you remember that journey when he was a high school coach working the camp and the math teacher, and you just see it all sort of come together here in this 3-week run that we have, this roller coaster, and it's so much fun. And then the other part of it, though, is the expectations and that piece of it, right? What's success? What's the definition of success? That teams that have had great seasons now, if they don't back it up in the tournament now, it sort of puts a negative spin on the season. So it all sort of comes full circle. But this is a great 3 weeks, and we've got the great team back in this thing, which always, to me, gives that extra dimension when you have it. When you have the team, the way you have Goliath in, and that Duke team is Goliath, and I think that makes it must-watch tournament if there's ever been one.
Well, and let's talk about the Duke monster, as you've pointed out, and where that is, because that would be waiting for Washington, D.C., and anybody around here wants to get out and see Duke play next week. I mean, no matter whom they play with, it might be Virginia Tech. I mean, certainly the ticket's going to be at a premium. It's going to be a little buzz that Duke is sort of kind of coming to town a little bit, right?
Absolutely. I mean, they're a prohibitive favorite. They've got one of the most exciting players that we've seen in college basketball in recent memories. So to be able to, this is about Duke and who can beat Duke. That's what this tournament's about. And seeing the Zion show before it heads to the NBA, which will happen pretty soon here. So this is incredible, much watch, and at a fever pitch. So I'm looking forward to seeing, and I think Duke's got a pretty easy path down the East, at least until they get to D.C. I think the path is fairly a mild path, and I think they'll go fairly far, and we'll see if the field can take them down. It does remind me, we're back in Minneapolis for the Final Four, and that does bring memories of the great Maryland-Duke matchup from back then.
Well, no good ones for me unless you count halftime. Leigh Klein is here from that bracket show, as well as an adjunct professor these days on the backside of an incredible career at 5-star and working with kids. For the cutting through the hyperbole of all this, you've been at this a long time. This weekend you hear, the Zion show up there with the Luau Sindor and, Bill Walton and, all the names of dominant players who played at that level. Some thoughts for you on where this is in the modern era, because there are no more 4-year, shows the way we remember it back in the day 30, 35 years ago,
So, yeah, I mean, it wasn't like, I remember, and you probably remember this, Nestor, when you had Phi Slamma Jamma and you knew that they were going to be good and they're going to be bringing it back. Or you had Patrick Ewing in the Georgetown team and you knew that Ewing was still there and you knew how good he was.
Well, I was a Maryland guy, so dealing with Ralph Sampson for 4 years. I mean, the thought that he was going to be in and out on Terry Holland in 6 months, that didn't exist back then, right?
Right, absolutely. You didn't have that. And everything's accelerated. I mean, we're in an era in which it's just everything, what used to be 4 years, now is 4 weeks.
Well, I think we learned that right around Diamond Stone if we didn't learn that during Steve Francis, right? I mean, in our part of the world, and certainly Bruno Fernando feels like he's got one loss left in him as a Maryland. You know what I mean? Like we just blink. He just got here, right? And that's where we are. And I think that's hard to grasp to some degree. And I think it's harder to judge coaches on all of that, right? Because there's no tomorrow. There's just right now, literally.
Well, and the other part is the destination. So I think I would challenge you that the destination for the player has changed. So when we talk about the Diamond Stones or that part, the destination was NBA. Maryland was a stop along the way. So how quick can they you don't want to stay at the stop too long if the destination is the NBA, is sort of the mindset that we're dealing with. And so if they feel that the NBA, they get there quicker, they're going to go as quick as possible. On the other side, back as we rewind it, college basketball in itself was its own destination. It was that precious. It was that type of thing. It's just not that right now. And so that's what we're dealing with from a fan perspective. And we just got to accept it. There's just no, and we'll see. This could all change these next few years. But right now, this is where we're at. And you just, who's going to win this thing is going to be the group that could bond together as a team to put the self and the draft prospects and all that on the side to be able to make the extra pass that's going to take for somebody else, which that person who made the pass is not going to get the credit in order to win a game.
Leigh Allen Klein is the way to follow him and that bracket show out on Twitter as we get ready for Maryland. And we almost got UMBC there. Vermont winds up on the 13 line with Florida State as we go around the brackets here a little bit, Leigh. First things first, Gonzaga, and I know we talked about that. I talked a lot about that a couple of weeks ago, and I had a lovely trip to Spokane one afternoon last summer after being at Yellowstone. And, they spit up all over themselves in the conference tournament. I sat and watched conference tournament games over the weekend. My wife and I were, out drinking and having a good time. The weather was nice. We had some snowballs, sang some songs, had some food, walked around the city, and there were games on from everywhere, and none of them felt like they mattered much to the brackets or to anyone's thoughts about who's in and who's not going to be in the tournament, and those bubble teams that all have the bad feelings and bad vibes after they go 18-12 or whatever and don't get invited. But for the brackets themselves and for where we are, give me a couple of teams that you like or don't like, or draws that you thought were good to maybe make some 4, 5, 6 seed likely or more likely to get to Minneapolis.
All right, so a couple of quick hitters here. I think Yale's a viable team. This LSU is carrying so much pressure from the death of Wade Sims to what's going on with Will Wade. Yale is a good team, and they have an opportunity to upset and move on. Murray State, I think we talk about, team of that type of success. I saw Marquette. I was at the Big East, had an opportunity to see them up close and personal, And outside of Marcus Howard, to be quite frank, I feel that this is a thin team and one that could be taken down. My X factor, and this is really, this is out on the limb, two things that I always say. There's always one bracket that completely breaks up where two double-digit seeds are there and you're facing each other. To me, I think that'll be in San Jose with Oregon and UC Irvine meeting each other. I see that sort of as the bust-up bracket. And then the other part of it is, we've much maligned the Pac-12 the entire year. 3 teams are in. Wouldn't it be fitting for them to have a team advance that's not supposed to? That is sort of, poetic justice. This is what the tournament's all about. I think Washington could be a team that can pause, a lot of problems to North Carolina. With the zone and all of that. I think Washington's sort of an X factor. I am not bullish on this Carolina team. I know they're probably 4th favorite in the field, but I think Carolina, the freshman point guard, Kobe White, to me, I think they're the first number 1 seed to falter.
Well, Leigh, I'm going to be following your brackets and following that bracket show and following you out on Twitter as we get into all of the madness around here. Bummer that we don't have more representation, but certainly it puts all the eggs in the Maryland basket. If you say Yale is a threat, that would be interesting if Maryland can get past their first game and see Yale over the weekend with a clear pathway to Washington, D.C. and Michigan State and Duke. Leigh, always a pleasure to check in with you. Thanks for talking basketball with us, and we'll be following along all weekend long, and hopefully we're still talking Terps basketball this time next week.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. It'll be great, and opportunity is there, so we'll see. We'll see. It's the best time of the year. Maybe we even get a little spring to come in.
Lead us to the promised land, Bruno Fernando, is what I say, and maybe we'll have time next week for the cherry blossoms down in Washington, D.C. Make a little time on that. Leigh Allen Klein, the way to follow him, that bracket show out on Twitter, and longtime CEO of 5-Star Basketball Camps, real basketball insider, giving us a look at the brackets. I'm holding the brackets on the WNST webcam. It's all brought to you by our friends at Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast, and tasty coffee. And don't forget the ROFO Rewards card and the app right in the palm of your hand. Use that when you're pumping your gas. You'll get your ROFO fried chicken and Western fries free of charge. Makes them taste even better, and they taste pretty good even when you buy them. And they have all sorts of specials going on at Royal Farms. We'll be telling you more about that. Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. I am on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and Snapchat and Instagram and streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. Baseball, football, March Madness, we got you covered. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.